Last month, over a period of 3 days, letter bombs were sent to over 9 army recruitment centres across the south of the UK. British security forces claim the bombs were sent from postal centres in Londonderry in Northern Ireland. A coded message sent to a Northern Irish newspaper announced the new IRA were behind the attacks, and also claimed that the attacks would continue when and where the IRA saw fit. These were the first attacks on the British mainland by the IRA and its new guise. Last summer, Vice went to Derry to meet dissident Republicans and find out about their war on drugs.
We don't like drug dealers.
Yeah?
Yeah, all drug dealership is a big shock.
While we were there, we were told to expect attacks on the British mainland. And now they're happening. In 2012, real IRA leader Alan Ryan was executed outside his home in Dublin. According to the press, he had been set up and murdered by drug gangs. Ryan had become the most high-profile casualty in the fight between dissident Republicans and warring gangs. But he wasn't going to be the last. It's pretty strange in the middle of this suburban part of Dublin. There's basically a military march going on right now. Must be a couple of hundred people here. I don't think it's just quite as big a turnout as they wanted, but it's certainly nothing I've ever seen before. So tell me what happened the day that Alan was shot. You were with him, right?
He liked to walk in the area, and he was out and about, like seeing people, and we were walking down towards another fella's house, and as we were walking, a gunman ambushed him from behind. He fired a number of shots. He killed Alan. He hit Aaron in the leg. I managed to run and jump behind a car, and then basically they drove off. But afterwards, it's just everything was kind of crazy, you know.
And why were they terrified of Alan? Because he was trying to fight against the drug dealers?
He was the leader of a fairly effective group of men that were targeting and executing drug dealers and had them on the run from the looks of it. And I think that seems to be the reason he was targeted anyways, was because he was shattering their organisations, and it was only a matter of time, I'd say, before he would have wiped them out.
The situation is so tense that 1 year on, local hoods broke into the cemetery and defaced Alan Ryan's grave. The real IRA broke away from the IRA in the 90s, rejecting the peace process and seeking to continue the war with Britain. They are a small but deadly force. At the heart of the drugs war is Londonderry, or Derry, a city so divided by sectarianism that it goes by 2 names. The city is the centre of Republican militants, and now, 16 years after the Good Friday Agreement that supposedly brought peace to the country, the IRA are gaining influence all over again. Another armed group, Republican Action Against Drugs, or RAD, have been fighting a war on drugs, shooting anyone perceived to be involved in dealing. Hundreds of young men have been threatened, sent into exile, or shot by paramilitaries. After the murder of Alan Ryan, it was announced that RAD and the real IRA would merge under the simple name, the IRA. We went to meet Derry's most influential Republican dissident, Gary Donnelly, a member of the 32-county sovereignty movement who has been accused of being the driving force behind the real IRA, a charge he denies. Gary has been repeatedly jailed and has serious charges for his links to militant Republicans, but for him, that's all part of the security service's efforts to undermine his organisation.
Do you think this is encouraging a rise in hatred of the state and possibly encouraging a rise of terrorism against the state?
Well, you know, when you talk about terrorism, what is terrorism?
Well,
you know, people here don't see it.
The people in power.
You know, the people here who you would accuse of being terrorists are members of this community. They live in this community. If they're lucky, they work in this community. They socialise. Their kids go to school in this community. They're not some type of Al-Qaeda terrorists that live in the mountains or caves and come in here and carry out, you know, atrocities and go back. These are people who live and socialise in these areas. Often the large section of this community would support these people and be their eyes and ears and support base. That is the reality. No police officers live in these areas. They're not part of our community. And for them to come into this community, they have to travel in convoy in heavily armoured Land Rovers. They have to wear bulletproof clothing.
They're very intense police fans. What do you think would happen if police did just kind of stroll through this area as they might in England?
I would doubt they would get out. I think they'd be killed.
There's been some quite severe punishment of people involved in dealing drugs, organisations like RAD and things like that.
Yeah, and in the absence of a normal policing service, then people will go to whoever will help them. The police turned a blind eye to drug dealing for a number of reasons.
And so someone comes and says, I've got this problem, this guy's selling drugs in my estate.
Yeah.
People then approach him and say, look mate, stop it.
Yeah.
And if he continues doing it?
If he continues, then if, you know, some people will go to the police don't deal with it, they'll go to Republicans. If he can't be reasoned with, there's no option. Do you allow this man to continue poisoning your community, or do you take action?
Do the armed people who kind of hand out the punishment, are they from within the community?
They live in these streets, their kids go to school in these streets, they're part and parcel of this community.
So there still are arms throughout this community?
There's no doubt there's arms throughout this community and right throughout this country. You know, I'd say there's good chances you probably have passed IRA people in this community. They're probably aware that you're standing here now. You know, they could even be watching us, seeing what's going on.
Could you see us returning to a time when there are IRA attacks within England?
Why not? There would be, you know, a strategic target. You know, it would be a high-profile target. You know, why wouldn't there be? It's England that's occupying Ireland.
This new Republican coalition has support from local gangs, such as the kids in the Bogside Republican Youth.
How old are you guys?
I'm 14.
15.
And why is it that you're fighting against the police?
Harassing bastards.
Do any of the older Republicans ever kind of take you guys aside and say, you know what, this isn't your fight yet?
No, they supply us.
What do they supply you with?
Petrol and paint.
How do you make a petrol bomb?
Petrol, sugar in a bottle with a wick. We shook a wick and then threw it.
When we're brought up seeing
We were
it.
brought up seeing it.
What Republican groups do you support?
RAD,
32
32s.
CSN.
We don't like drug dealers.
Yeah?
We like all drug dealers should be deserved to get shot dead.
What about the IRA?
I like IRA, but they're all joined together now, so they are. The RAD and the 32s are on the IRA now, so they are.
Does that make you feel kind of confident that there's like everyone's unified?
They're all together now.
As well as continuing the war with the British, the Republicans are now dealing with the drug dealers with extreme violence, with reported kneecappings and executions. Acting as a go-between for the paramilitaries and potential drug-dealing victims is the Rosemount Resource Centre, run by Tommy McCourt, a well-known Republican socialist who himself has little sympathy for the men being shot by the IRA.
If someone tells us that there is a threat and we believe it's a real threat, we believe it's our duty to pass that on. 90% of the time, at least or more, that usually results in some kind of an agreement where violence doesn't take place.
Can you remember the last time violence did take place?
3-4 weeks ago, I think there was a couple of young people. It was more of an antisocial behaviour issue, or at least there was a conflict emerging on the streets. Their names had come forward as, you know, these guys need to stop their carry on, and messages were getting passed back and forward. But it ended up, the particular behaviour that was engaged in continued, and this group then said that they were not prepared to negotiate any further. They were just going to deal with it. And the next thing we knew, these two young men were both shot in the legs.
After speaking with Tommy, we were put in contact with a man who was once one of the biggest dealers in Derry. Although his life is no longer under threat, he still refused to have his face filmed.
When I got out of prison, I had already been wanted by RAD, and they were, to be honest, they were quite fair. They gave me 2 chances before, and I fucked it up. I went back to doing what I was doing, and
How did they give you the chances? Did someone come and knock at your door?
somebody come and says that my life was in danger, and I went to certain Republicans and more or less said that I would knock it in the head and whatever, and then the threats were sorted. But after a while, I just got bored, and you know what I mean, missed the money, and just started it all over again. They gave me a couple of chances, and I fucked it up.
Do you think that the way that the IRA or RAD deal with drug dealers is harsh? Or
No, I
do you think
don't.
it's fair?
I believe in it, because my son's now a teenager, 16, and I'm very, very, very close to him. He was another reason why I turned my life around, because I couldn't spend any time with him. I'm never going to get another chance. You know, they were going to kill me, like, and the same guy that got my death threat lifted and told me that the threat was lifted, as the same boy that sat and told me, he says, you know, you're lucky to be alive. He says 2 or 3 times I sat with groups of men plotting, planning your murder. And them words send chills down my spine when somebody's telling you, you know, to your face, and the same person sitting shaking your hand and telling you fair play if you turn your life around. And
So do you think that the tactic of these kind of punishment shootings, does it work?
it stopped the drug dealing in Derry.
But does it work in the area as a whole?
Oh, it's worked all right. No, if they didn't do that, then this town would be awash with ecstasy tablets that are filled with rat poison. I mean, how many kids have to die or end up in hospital before shooting somebody doesn't seem harsh? This methadone and with the grass being the way it is, you've got all these youngsters running around committing suicide, you know? Like, at what point are you saying enough's enough? So, well, what they've done in this town, I don't disagree with, you know?
I wouldn't like to be a drug dealer in this neighborhood one little bit. It sounds terrifying.
Shooting drug dealers is one thing and kind of comes with the territory. But we'd heard about a guy in the city who'd been shot for selling legal highs in his bong shop.
Yeah, he's not going to talk to us. He's terrified. Apparently, he was sent a death threat last year for speaking on the radio. These rad guys seem to control this place. It's a real kind of mafioso situation. Everyone's shit scared of them, and it's understandable. He kept on saying, they just pick up the phone and I'll be shot. It's not worth my while to talk to you, it's not worth my while. He's visibly shaking while he's doing it. I guess once you've had your legs shot in, you're gonna be pretty nervous. Clearly not pissing around. If I was him, I wouldn't talk to us either.
So we're on our way to meet a woman called Donna Smith. Last year, her son Andrew was executed by RAD, who have since joined the IRA. They claim that Andrew was dealing drugs, but Donna maintains that there was never any evidence to support that claim.
Last year, Andrew was at home with his girlfriend, and 3 masked men come to his door, and they couldn't get in the door, so they fired shots through the window, and Andrew was shot and Andrew was killed. They didn't know who they were shooting at, actually. I think could have been anybody that was in the house, you know. But Andrew was murdered. And
Why were RAD sending death threats to Andy and his friends?
they said Andrew was this big, major drug dealer, you know. Andrew's lifestyle did not warrant being a big drug dealer, because most of the time I had to give him money.
Do you suspect that the people who killed Andrew are from this community?
Well, they are. They are from the community.
Do you know who they were?
I know members of RAD, sort of, but I can't pinpoint and say it was you, you know. But I know RAD, like. Everybody knows who was on RAD.
There seems to be a tradition that some parents actually take their children to RAD to be shot in order to save them from being executed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine what it's like to be in that position?
I can't imagine it at all. And for a parent to have to take their child to be shot is, I don't know, it's just unbelievable to me, you know.
If you had one thing to say to the people calling themselves the IRA, what would it be?
Just please tell us why they really murdered Andrew, why he's done that, and for not to do it again, not to have it in our family sitting the way we're sitting today. You know, we done nothing wrong to be sitting like this. It's just, every day is a nightmare, just with Andrew not here. No family needs to be going through this.
We headed back to Cregan to meet the next generation of young Republicans. These kids believe the fight for a united Ireland should continue. However, they weren't even born when the peace process began. They're members of the Alan Ryan Memorial Band, set up in honour of the murdered Dublin Real IRA leader, who they view as a working-class hero.
When Alan Ryan was killed in Dublin, what was the reaction in Derry?
Disbelief that it actually happened. Like, I'm first Republican to be killed by drug dealers in a long time. And
Was he a bit of a hero?
he's a working class hero.
Do you support the paramilitary punishments of drug dealers and stuff?
I don't see the problem there is the police still don't do nothing. Anywhere you go at the weekend, you see people kind of high on drugs, drink, people stand in street corners, young people. It's sickening to see. And Derry needs help, and we need a rehabilitation centre, we need help for drug addicts.
Patty is stopped and searched by the police nearly every day. They say they're looking for munitions, and every time he's stopped he's given one of these cards. Their actions almost seem counterproductive, as they make young Republicans like Patty even more alienated from the political mainstream.
If it was happening in Scotland or Wales, it'd be headline news all over, but it's pushed back to North Ireland. That's just Emmons over in Ireland again. Forget about Emmons. They're bloodthirsty savages trying to start violence. IRA, they're out. All they want to do is shoot and kill people. Reality is that it can be far from the truth. And IRA have united Ireland, trying to achieve it, and alongside that, they're helping out the communities, as they've done throughout the past 40 years.
The strategy of locking up senior figures of the neo-IRA has decimated them in the short term, yet they managed to continue carrying out potentially legal threats 16 years on from the peace process. It seems you don't need the British Army on the streets of Northern Ireland for these groups to draw more recruits, potentially fueling the conflict for generations to come. The neo-IRA, we've been told, still has a force of 1,000 young men behind it who will continue their low-level insurgency outwardly against the British state and inwardly in their own war on drugs.